Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Two Moons and a Microphone. My name is Tanya. I love fantasy, but I keep it real. Season 2 of Two Moons and a Microphone is sponsored by Housebar. Housebar is the bottle shop remixed for adventurous drinkers, foodies, and home entertainers. Housebar is here to help people gather well, live fully, and celebrate intentionally. Visit House Bar in the DMV at House Bar Navy Yard or Georgetown. Hey, good night, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming in. Hello to everyone in the chat. I am very excited to welcome my guest, Fred Greenhalgh. He is an audio wizard, the director and producer and screenwriter, right? Co-writer of the ElfQuest audio movie.
That's true. That's true. We did. I led the adaptation team.
Yes.
Alexander and James Leva are wonderful people.
And director and producer of Star Trek Con, which is out now. New episodes every Monday. So it premiered last week. So 2 episodes are out and they are very good, very immersive, which is Fred's specialty, to make these immersive sound, like epic level cinematic audio dramas. So it is a pleasure to have you here, Fred. Hello, Fred.
Hello. So thanks for having me. Yeah, Tanya, love what you do, and I know somewhere back when we were doing the ElfQuest project, first was introduced to you and the work you're doing and to support and uplift and bring together the community. And yay, yeah, so glad to be here.
Thank you. Well, I've just ever since the idea of this ElfQuest audio movie came about, I have been like so thrilled to meet you and learn more about what you do in your art. But can you tell everyone who's watching how this got started? I heard it had something to do with Richard trying to update audio tapes, like
Yes.
books on tape.
Yeah, it's a fun little origin story because so I've been doing what I've been doing for close to 20 years now, and this is just before the pandemic. I was meeting a wonderful fellow, Sandy Resnick, who was at DC Comics at the time, and without getting too far into projects that never came to be, we were talking for reasons, and at any rate, lots of stuff didn't happen because the pandemic kind of ruined the world. But in the ashes, some phoenixes came to be. So what happened is, as I understand it, is that Richard had put a post. I mean, Sandy is like had been in comics for a very long time and knew Richard and Wendy. I think probably officially through their time at DC, but also just as friends and people, a fan of ElfQuest himself for years. And so he just happened to see that Richard was posting about, hey, is this like pandemic project I might transcribe or bring to tape these, I think maybe from the 80s or 90s ElfQuest, the novelizations that had been done as sort of books on tape, and make them re-release them. And Sandy, as I understand it, sort of politely tapped Richard on the shoulder and said, maybe you should, before that happens, talk to this guy, Fred. And so I think initially I thought I was just going to be there as like a tech guy to sort of help Richard figure out how to transcribe these tapes. But as we got talking into it, next thing you know, he'll say that I convinced him, and I'll say that he convinced me. But somehow, between the two of us talking, we decided that we needed to make a, I think Sandman had just come out. So we were like, we want that level of production for ElfQuest. Wouldn't that be amazing? And that's sort of how the small ball of snow started going down the mountain. And then, the whole ElfQuest community showed up with our early bird campaign, which allowed us to kind of get enough seed funding to get, an amazing voice cast assembled. And then when we're at that stage, we went officially to Kickstarter, which funded the rest of the production and, launched the audio movie into history. And it was a great time.
It was. I mean, it just reinvigorated the fandom to have this like shiny new thing out in the world and to follow it and to help support it. I mean, it was completely crowdfunded, which is amazing. And, it was so faithful to the source material that, that is something that Wendy and Richard had always, championed, and they were very steadfast that would, if there was going to be any kind of theatrical production, that it be faithful to the comic and the soul of the comic, right? So it just clicked all. I mean, it checked all
Yeah.
the boxes, and I have to talk about Cree Summer because
Yeah. No, I mean, chef kiss.
God, like when it was
Yeah.
announced that Cree Summer was going to be like the narrator. I mean, first of all, what like whose idea was that to have Cree Summer be the
Well,
narrator?
Cree, is a big ElfQuest fan. I think we released all this stuff. So one of the cool things that happened if you were a backer is we eventually came up with the idea to have sort of a behind the scenes kind of like listen along things, and then we sometimes got some of the cast behind the scenes afterwards. So I think it was one of those that Cree talked about her relationship to ElfQuest, which is really profound. And she's just been it as a fan, and she has stories about her father who was a voice actor and how comics just all just like all ElfQuest fans like really connected with her and helped see herself in a fantasy world and meant so much to her. And so uh I think it was like on the internet. She made it no secret that once the project was sort of like floating around as something that could exist, she might have said, or someone might have said, "Would you?" Somehow, someone made the connection of like, "Would you be in it?" This is back when Twitter still existed, and it was like they'd be like, "Yeah, like they should talk to me or something." And so we're like, "Well, she invited her to reach out, so we should go. We should go call her up." And so yes, I think it was just a matter of like the universe kind of all finding ourselves. And yeah, fun fact, she was the one, I think at the time, we hadn't figured out our bear claw, and she was the one who was like, you need to talk to Jeff Parisi. He is the guy. So
He
anyways,
was so the
yeah.
guy.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I think it was great. I mean, I think that what was so fun on ElfQuest is that like the joy and the love and the passion that the fandom feels like extended pretty much throughout the entire project. Like we would have like like agents in Hollywood who were like, "Oh my gosh, you're doing ElfQuest. I love ElfQuest." And like we would just get these stories would just sort of like bubble up from kind of business correspondence around the project. And yeah, and like so many of the cast had just connected with the story on some level. So it always felt like this is not just like a project, it's not a job, it's a thing that is, yeah, there's a community that wants it, and we have this real special honor to have been tapped to sort of be the conduit of this thing. But the thing is not about us. I think I've had especially now with Con as well, like a lot of opportunities to work on, things that are, they're not my thing. But I like, so I'm there to use like my skills and talents to kind of, to take really good care of this thing that means a lot to a lot of people, and honor, I'm not there to kind of put my fingerprints all over something, and there to say, how do we make the best version of this in this medium, which I am kind of ridiculously passionate about, and such. So anyways, yeah, it's a really, there's a lot of kismet involved in how that project came together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So much. So you were not familiar with ElfQuest before you
No,
really?
it's a shame to admit. I mean, I would have, because it was very much the type of fantasy I was consuming when I was younger, but for whatever reason, yeah, not till later in life.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Because I mean, so let's talk a little bit about how how did it become that like sound was your thing instead of like like you said you do everything that others do without a camera, like everything
Mm.
is like the mic or recording the sound. So how did that start for you? Like what is your genesis story with that?
Yeah, let's see if we can get well, so I think there's something that is not necessarily talked about that I learned as I started meeting other audio geeks in life, which is I think some brains are wired. So like if you meet like photographers, they'll talk about how they just see the world in a certain way, or light affects them in certain ways, and they're always sort of thinking and taking pictures and stuff. And I think um for me, sounds have always carried a lot of emotional resonance, and I think I have a lot of like emotions and memories associated with sounds. And so going back to in particular, uh when I there's a period of time in my life when I was at my same, where my mom it was me and my mom and my brothers with our grandmother in this creaky old family farmhouse, and like the texture of that place and the creaking of the way the house groaned. I mean, there's a lot of like kind of scary Stephen King kind of stuff here because the house was big, sort of haunted, and it had weird stuff that happened and stuff on the stairs, etc. But there's like such a like memories of that time captured by sound and like experiences like there's the Peter and the Wolf record, which is a really
Yes.
evocative, very sound forward record. And I can just remember like a sound can bring me to a very specific feeling of being a child, like wrapped up in a blanket near a wood stove during a winter storm, like just by hearing something. And so on some level, it took kind of a journey to sort of understand that, like, oh, I'm just a person who just interacts with sound in a way that not all people necessarily do. And yeah, and that part of it was not really till I was in college. I sort of bopped around a lot. I kind of wanted to go to film school, but I wasn't from a artistic family. And my mom said, go to a state school where you're not going to get in a bunch of debt. And there, I just didn't really find my people, but I did sort of look at different resources the school offered. And one of those was to go on an exchange program. So I ended up in New Orleans, which had a program where you could sort of like shadow a actual film crew. And the Runaway Jury was being filmed in New Orleans at the time. It was sort of the early stages of the Louisiana tax credits. And they just like had this clipboard of like, which like department do you want to like go shadow? And I was like, I don't know, for some reason I checked sound. And there was this experience of running around the French Quarter with like a group of people with microphones, and like, I don't know, the sense of like camaraderie and fun and the gear. I just was totally hooked, and I got my first portable sound recorder and just started collecting sounds. And then over time, somebody was like, "Have you ever heard of these old time radio dramas?" I was like, "What the heck is an old time radio drama?" And
Oh, yeah. My
I think the
nana
first,
used to listen to those.
yeah, well, the first was actually, I think the first thing I listened to was Lord of the Rings. The BBC has a masterful Lord of the Rings full cast production that was, long before Peter Jackson's version. And I think I got that like on a road trip from like a library or something. I was like, what is this? And then I got into the actual American, 40s and 50s stuff. And at that point, it was just like, why aren't people doing this today? And that, kind of the rest is history. At that point, I had the bug and really it's been interesting because it's been almost 20 years now, and the early days of the internet was very, it wasn't the early days of the internet, but the early days of podcasting, like 2005, 2006 was like, hand coding. It felt like we were all like, on some desert island putting little bottles out on the water together, like hand coding XML to get your podcast to go up there and paying stupid,
Yes.
it is like this whole thing. And yeah, and it was really, and I started a show called Radio Drummer Revival, which was, was a weekly show, both on air and on podcasting for the time. And it started like a sort of a community of all the different, I guess I sort of found myself in the role of like collecting the bottles, watching up on my shore. And I was like, wait, there's more of us out here. We should be like a community. And so it's been, if you look at it today, it's actually quite a thriving, independent audio drama, audio fiction. And now, with live action role playing stuff going on, it's a really cool community. And so I don't know what small part I may have played in sort of getting us all together, but it's been really cool to see it go from, I mean, it's still so sort of passion and independent driven, but also a place that also has, projects like Con and real studios entering the space. And yeah, just it's been a wild ride, and yeah, just been honored to be able to kind of keep learning stuff and putting out stories and getting better, hopefully, what I do along the way.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, I don't know anyone else to compare you to, so I think that you're the best. So I'll just
Oh,
say that
thank you.
you're the
Thank you.
best.
Thank you.
But do all directors of audio drama collect all their sounds themselves like you do? Like I saw some of your posts where you were kind of like recording, I think it was like ice or
That could
melting
be,
or
yeah. I mean, it's I think there's different, not necessarily all the directors. I mean, I think there's sound design. So there's a different, I'd say in this field in general, everybody wears a lot of hats. So it's not like film, or, like an independent film, the director might be doing like 10 jobs. But on a feature film, that's, not necessarily the case. And, in podcasts, it's like, yeah, lots of people do lots of things. So there's definitely not uncommon for someone who directs a project to also sound design it and edit it, maybe do a bunch of other things as well. So I don't know, the sort of collection of sound part is sort of part hobby, but part also just me seeking for kind of a sense of like what like I guess if you're going to look at on my work, I've worked on shows of really different types of style and tone and genre, but I want the experience is like if you press play, you're in another world for the duration of that experience. And sometimes the hyper realness is what makes it like that. So like one of my first kind of big breakthrough project back in 2014 was, Lock and Key by Joe Hill, Gabe Rodriguez. That show, we recorded on location with actors out in the real world, because if we go to look at the comics, like Key House is like basically a character. And so, very early on, we're like, how do we even approach this project without a house feeling like, or how do we make a house feel like a character in an audio play where you don't have like big sets and all this beautiful art? And so, recording in an actual house with creaky doors and a creepy basement and, stairs and such was sort of how we honored that. So that's sort of a circuitous way of saying like, I'm going to work on shows where, yeah, the like that abstract sound of like ice breaking maybe makes sense. There's other times where, if I'm working on something that's maybe more kind of feeling like animation or video gamey, it's sort of more stylized and it's more kind of abstract sounds or sounds that you might invent with in post and sort of inside the computer box. But I don't know. I just like making weird sounds. My kids make fun of me and say I have more toys than they do. But I think it's and I love seeing this is we're talking Star Trek, we're talking ElfQuest. There's also Star Wars is out there. The people at Skywalker Sound, are really, really inspiring. They put out this like promo video, I think, with Apple, which is like just goes a little bit behind the scenes of like how they make just what goes into making an Andor or Rogue One or something like that. And you just see, and if you're like, if these are not like, big kids playing with toys, like I don't know what other kind of craft is, because there's so much of it that's like you have to what you think something will sound like or what something actually sounds like in real life is not actually what it needs to be to create the emotional experience of the story that you're telling. And so there's a lot of like just having to kind of just play, because you have to go to the most obvious ideas and then try different things until you get to the ones that are actually work. And it's a little bit of a hard process to sort of really break down into words, but it really is just sort of like playing. It's like, and sometimes like weird thing, you're asleep and then like in your subconscious like, oh, this walrus is actually what I needed here, or whatever.
So do you like read the script first and decide like these are the types of sounds that I want to have going on along with the dialogue and the score as well? So how do you decide what to include and what not to include? I think that's like really interesting.
Yeah, no, I think the approach is probably not so different than like a film or something where the script says I mean, there's different ways of what belongs in an audio script, but the way I've come to think of it is that your audio script is a little bit like a comic script in the way that the traditional comic script, because actually it turned out that ElfQuest was written differently because like Wendy knew she was just making it, so she didn't need to like write like a writer to an artist is often how a lot of comic scripts are written. So when I've had a chance to adapt those scripts, you sort of see like the description of like what a frame is supposed to evoke, and it'll often will say like this is what's happening in this frame, but there's also sort of like emotional details for the story that the art's supposed to convey. And so a lot of audio scripts, I think, are sort of that. They're a letter to both the performers. The performers understand enough of the story to actually do their roles correctly, but it is also a letter to the sound designer so that the sound designer can think, okay, how do I how do what is not just literally what would be in the scene, because often like what's literally in that scene is not necessarily super interesting, but it's emotionally what does the scene need to do uh, to evoke the emotion that we need. And I think going back to ElfQuest, the very very first scene is we need to establish that the elves are like deathly afraid of fire really early, and so there's like stuff that is not necessarily obvious on the surface of like low tones that sort of evoke to the listener sort of like a fear response. That's just sort of like a biological thing of like certain types of wavelengths do that to people do that in horror movies. There's a certain types of sounds you always hear in horror movies because they just biologically evoke a fear response. And so we're using some of that in the early parts of ElfQuest so that you associate, even without realizing we're doing it to you, that the humans there at the campfire ready to like sacrifice Redlance are not good. We need to be
Oh,
afraid of them. And then of course that gets like, amplified a lot very quickly as like the next scene unfolds when the humans come back for more. So there's like stuff like that just comes from sort of a psychological understanding of sound. That's like the craft is both the literal sounds, but understanding like an emotional level, what are the sounds, how do we sort of hack the brain and paint these pictures in your mind with all these sound frequencies.
that is fascinating. Oh, I love that. I'm not a big horror fan. My husband like forces me to watch horror movies with him and I hate it every time. But I was reading an article about you and you've done these was it 8 series of Undertow, this horror series
Yeah.
and there was something that you said like usually like kids are afraid of the dark. So it is like creepy sounds that gets that fear response first and that just totally resonated with me like
Mm,
100%. But
yeah. Well,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, and I think, yeah, I see there's someone in the comments
Yes,
here
you
too
have
is
some questions.
talk about yeah, who's into scary stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm from Maine. It's the land of Stephen King, and we sort of Halloween never ends here. So there's I don't know, sort of baked into it. But also like the part of Maine I'm originally from, like down East Maine, is very I don't know, it has a real gothic feel to it, and there's a sort of uncanny amount of weird stuff happening there. So, if you're one of those people who's into like ley lines and weird stuff being, I don't know, it's a weird part of the world, but yeah, I don't know. There's something about oh, maybe I'll come at it this way because maybe there's a question in there about like what is it about horror that makes people want to continue to subject themselves to these experiences, but it is like um when I think about stories fundamentally, they're one of our superpowers as species. To me, they are our superpower, the ability to, communicate with generations through time. And I think, thinking about on a tribal level, cautionary tales are probably some of the first tales that we told. And so there's something I just think it's a very, very deeply rooted that like don't go out past the campfire or you might get eaten is just like very, very, very primal. And there's something I don't know, I think there's something in us that craves that. And uh, we just and it's a way to sort of like go to those dark places, but know that like we can hit pause when we need them to stop, and it's not like our world, which doesn't do
Oh,
that.
yes,
Um,
yes. Oh,
yeah,
so we have a few questions from the
sure.
chat. What makes you decide what project to direct and which one not to?
Yeah.
Or
Well, I mean, not to be crude, but like when they're paying gigs, like the thing come along, I'm a gun for hire. But no, I think I don't know. I think projects find me too. I think like the ElfQuest experience, like I've I don't know. I'm not like I'm a person who like exists in this world, but I'm not, I don't spend a lot of time like relentlessly like pitching and chasing people down. Like I find myself interested in certain things and I put my all into them, and people hopefully like them, and word gets around, and then people who want to make other interesting things find me, and we hopefully find a way to make the project happen. And so to me, anything that has sort of, good characters and is a good story for audio, I'm sort of in. And so it's a pretty big remit. I've done children's programming as well, and it was darker children's programming, admittedly. So I probably am not the person to do, I don't know, sort of bubblegum kids podcast, but I don't know. It's a certain sensibility. So somehow, whatever wavelength I'm operating under, we sort of our orbits sort of intersect, and I've been lucky enough to be able to keep finding enough things to keep working for 20 years at this.
That is, I mean, you're a veteran now. It's
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
So another question from the chat was, how did you know that Naveen Andrews was the voice for Khan? So
Yeah.
we're
I mean,
switching over to Star Trek.
Yeah, okay, we'll switch to Star Trek. Yes, Naveen Andrews, Kazbek Khan. He's amazing. I mean, I think there was it was the case that we wanted to cast a South Indian descent, or cast appropriately in that department, and then you sort of looked at who's out there, and it was sort of a no-brainer, for at least for me. So you're like, this is I did obviously, I think huge fan of Lost. That was like there were a couple other sort of like bingeable shows in that era that I had come across, but like for me, that was like one of the first TV shows I really got addicted to, in the way that like we think of as modern binge watching and streaming. It just was like still in those sort of early days where I don't think I ever watched an episode on ABC, but by the time word of mouth spread and previous seasons were available, it was like, I think it was like Netflix still on DVD, and like watching the entire thing in big
I
chunks.
watched it live on ABC. They took 8 years or however long of my life.
Yeah.
For that ending, I'm still a little mad about it, but I did love a lot of the performances.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
I mean,
for I think for Naveen's sake, I think he has said things on the record that like the earlier seasons are his favorites, and leave it at that. But
yes.
yeah, I think you master.
Yes, I am salty. I'm salty about it.
That's fair enough. I mean, I do think there's a cautionary tale in there about like, I mean, honestly, that is, you bring up something that I do find I tend to like movies. I tend to be very careful about series, because I feel like just because of the way the industry works, they set it up so that you have all these shows that no one ever just, it's very, very rare to have a complete story told, even in 10 episodes. And I've given up 10 hours of your life only for them to set up a second season that may or may not ever happen. Whereas like, a movie, you have an idea and they explore the idea, and at the end of 2 hours, 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, like there's a completion to that idea, and you can go on with your life. And that property of television, which I think is as much a sort of business thing, that because of the way television works, that's like it just feels like people aren't allowed to just tell a complete story. It's like that's why I get so many beloved series that kind of just fade away instead of like ending correctly, which is not very fun as an audience member once you've invested all that time. Come on.
No, that's not fun. But what the Lost people did was they were like, "We have your answers for you,"
and they were just
lied. Like,
yes. It had unsatisfactory answers.
Are coming, and then they were like, "Oh,
just kidding. We didn't really have a plan.
We didn't know what to do." And poor Walt, whatever, he grew up too fast and just disappeared. But Naveen Andrews is
highlight.
He is delivering on Khan, and it's so Shakespearean in the way that the story is going so far. I mean, I'm not like the hardcore Trekkie that the SyFy sisters are. I mean, I've always loved Star Trek. I don't know the names of every episode by name, but yeah, I'm really intrigued in this story that kind of bridges between the TOS episode and the Wrath of Khan movie. So it's really cool. Plus, it's so meta that they're listening to tapes of what's happening, and you're listening to this audio drama. I just love that little.
Yeah, it's hilarious, because I think what is just on that particular part about the tapes, because like and this ties into sound design, because it's like the tapes are canonical. If you I don't know. I'm not enough of a Trekkie to say which episode to go watch to see the tapes. The tapes are canonical, and so I was like, this is so wonderfully retro that in a, starship, they're using tapes. It's like analog technology. But like, when you go back to the 60s, and that was what kind of a fun thing too, because we were given, access to like the sound effect library and all these like the crown jewels of these iconic sounds. And it is so, I'd say probably more from the 60s series than from the Wrath of Khan are in the show. Depends. Transporter is it? Anyways, it's a mix, but like,
Mhm.
there's such a very distinctive of like, oh yeah, this is sort of what we thought the future would sound like, but it's still the 1960s, and so there's the certain way certain computers sound, and the way the tapes sound, it's just really a fun aesthetic to work with, and I think there's many of the sounds are either original or sort of like remastered versions of original, but there's also times where we needed, like, I think in the med lab, more than was in the original. And so, our sound designer gets to pull up his like vintage synths and try to like get this like like these very, very specific,
I
like
love it.
retro futuristic sounds. And so, yeah, a lot of thought went into stuff like that of just, yeah. And I was reading, so, I think we talked a little bit about the script. So, our lead writer, Kirsten Beyer, something nice, one of her interviews today said something like, for her, we needed some answer as to like, why are we exploring this story now? Which is where the sort of idea of the framing narrative came from, which to me makes a ton of sense. Like, oh yeah, that does make a ton of sense. Because it does pose this question of like, because yes, I mean, maybe it would make sense to just be like, okay, we're just in a linear narrative. We're with Khan. Here we go. But because of this framing narrative, it gets to ask these interesting questions and sort of like live in this, kind of, it's not a multiverse exactly, but a world where the same events, depending on point of view, can be painted very differently, and who tells the story really matters. And yeah, how differently is a villain if you're, walking a mile in the villain's shoes, and it, it's sort of, I think it's much more interesting in terms of like the themes the story is talking about, when you're able to use that, yeah, the question of like, what is history and who gets to tell the story, adds this whole other dimension to it that's not just the plot, which is a ton of fun.
Yeah, plus I think we are all at this, I mean, 2025 kind of
Yeah.
re-examining the narratives of certain things, and are certain characters misunderstood. Although just so far with these first 2 episodes, even though like we're supposed to be watching or listening to the Khan character kind of devolve into
Hmm.
this like mega villain, even though he was a tyrant for like before this all like takes place. And I can kind of hear it in the delivery of the dialogue. Like he's trying to be all very nice, and we're all this family, and I'm here to, make this like a very successful new colony. And but at the same time, like everyone is super like tentative about
Yes.
either like challenging him or, having any kind of division. Like, everything is my lord. They're very deferential to him. So I automatically don't trust that. So I'm so excited to like
Yeah.
hear how this all like plays out.
Oh yeah, no, I'm having as much fun as anyone, because I know I know where it's going, and just seeing what engages people each week, and the speculation is like a ton of fun. But yeah, I think these are some of the conversations earlier on. It's like, if he needs to go on a journey, it's not going to be very interesting to spend 5 hours or so of story time with someone who kind of has no growth and is just sort of from a fixed mindset. And so, but at the same time, we can't invalidate who we know Khan to be. And so, yeah, I think the kind of version that we landed on, where yeah, he's not a ruthless dictator. He is inspirational and charismatic, but you do not want to be on his bad side. No.
Yeah, not good. So, yeah, very. Yeah, it's fascinating. So cool. So, we've like reunited with Tim Russ again
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah. Oh man,
from the
he's so
audio
great.
movie
He's so great.
and here. And yeah, if you want to talk about keeping it real, he was on the Sci-Fi Sisters live show. That was the realest thing I've ever seen in my life.
That's great.
And he did not remember doing the ElfQuest audio
Okay.
movie
Yes.
at
Well,
all, but it was a couple years later.
it's okay.
But
It's okay.
it's okay.
He does lots of things.
He
So
does. He's very busy, so it was okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm with you, Joel. I think I'm from Maine, big Stephen King fan. And as you like look at his work, I think what is uh it's like the humans are like mostly the worst most of the time. A lot of the books, like it, yeah, okay, we got a creepy clown, but like, oh my god, like Bev's dad, like what? Like and the way that like evil, yeah, just like evil lies in the hearts of men and women and other people. It's like the yeah, I think that's anyways, as we know, as we can see in our world around us, the things that people can do to each other is far worse than monsters. So I think, I mean, you have to be careful, but I don't know. I think, on some level, that's the fun part about horror is that you can also kill the monster at the end of the movie in a way that like it's very hard to fit. Some of the challenges we face today feel very intractable and very ambiguous, and having a distinct bad guy that can be defeated uh can be very therapeutic. It's its own fantasy. um
100%.
but I mean, that being said, I was thinking about this today, just well, just about ElfQuest. I think, because I think when we were talking about coming on this interview, thinking about like what sorts of things do like Star Trek and ElfQuest have in common. And I think it varies on different versions of Star Trek, but I think in general it is just about lots of different beings all trying to figure out how to coexist. And on some level, that's what ElfQuest is about too. Or there's not like a distinctive like good, unlike all these other fantasies that it's like the big bad guy and the forces of good coming to a showdown. ElfQuest is like a journey of self-discovery, and even the beings that you think are nasty have their side of the story, and the more you learn about their side of the story, the harder it is to think of them as sort of one-dimensional baddies. And I think that's, to me, when I was just starting to get exposed to ElfQuest, that was the part that really was like, this is so cool, because we don't see this a lot in many stories. Lots of stories are sort of simplistic and dualistic as opposed to sort of multicolor. And I think, yeah, I like multicolor.
Oh, yeah, me too. I mean, with another Star Trek actor, Robert Picardo, when
Yeah.
he was doing Pick Nose in the audio movie, first of all, he gave so much dignity
Yeah.
to the trolls, which I'm not sure always translates at that part of the story.
Hmm.
Um, for the trolls, I mean, through the entire 47-year
Yeah.
saga, you get a lot more of a balanced view of the trolls, but at that part of the story, like at the beginning, in the comic anyway, or at least when I was reading it, like for the first couple of times, like you don't get the same thing. You're just like, you're rooting for the elves, like they need
Yeah.
the help, but then he was like, "You came into our house,
Yeah, you
like
came
this
and trashed the place, guy.
is like, what is this? That's not friendly." Like,
Yeah.
so good. And he just delivered one line so well. I could not stop like re-listening to it because they were like, "Oh, well, we're not afraid of the sun. Like we're like, we like the dark, but we're cool. We're not scared like you are." Like kind of, and he was like, "Well, awful nice for you." Like,
Yeah.
and you're about to like die in the desert. Like
Yeah.
it was
Good
just
luck.
so great.
Yeah,
Just loved it so
he
much.
was amazing. Again, we were very lucky, and I think maybe the fact that we did it during the pandemic made it easier for people to say yes when they're weren't in competing with television and movies that they were in at the same time. So, but yeah, hopefully you come back to if we did more. But yeah, he was just another one like Tim who we just said, hey, would you want to be in this project? And it's like, show me the script, and like the script sounds cool. Let's do it.
And you'd worked with him before.
Yes, he was in Homefront, which was based on Craig Allinson's independent sci-fi series. So he was a lizard person in that. So not exactly a troll, but he was a creature that got spoiler thrown out in airlock. And I was actually introduced through Kate Mulgrew, who'd worked on that project as well. So we did not get Kate into ElfQuest, but maybe, never say
Maybe.
never.
You never know. Never know. Yeah, she's great. She was on with the SyFy sisters too. And she does the audiobooks for there's an like autobiography of the captains,
Oh, that's
and
fun.
she did the audiobook for that.
Yeah, she's I mean, obviously an immensely talented performer, but like in terms of just any book, well, I'm mostly familiar with her Joe Hill novels that she does because like I said, Stephen King family, extended family, big into it, and yeah, she just does that. It does that thing where you sometimes audiobooks can be a hit or miss for me. Like sometimes you get narrators who just kind of read it in this sort of very disconnected sort of thing, but then when you really get somebody who is able to really convey the sort of soul of the book, and it really like and it's hard to say because it's not really about inflection or this or that. I mean, it's like what Cree had that too, where she just started talking, and you're like, okay, we're on the around the campfire together, and you're here to tell me a story, and I will stay here till dawn to hear you tell me a story, and just has that sense of whatever it is that makes you want to just sit down and listen and go on a journey with them. So anyways, yeah, wonderful performer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love her. I've loved her since like A Different World, since I was like a teenager.
Yeah.
So, I mean, amazing, amazing talent. And she's done so many voices. Had you ever worked with her before the ElfQuest project? Since
No,
did
so
you?
yeah, to be clear, she wasn't in ElfQuest. She was in Homefront. But yeah, she was in when we did Lock and Key. She played a very nasty boy. If anyone, okay, what? Yeah, Ellie's. Yeah, there's a very nasty mother figure in that book and graphic novel, and she played that character. And yeah, and that was a connection through the author Joe Hill, who's like, Kate's read some of my books. Maybe she'd want to do a cameo in this, and so we got her for that. And then for the Homefront project, they wanted like like sort of a sassy AI kind of character, so that's what she played in that
Oh,
project.
neat.
Um, and yeah, so that was fun. Yeah, real fun to work with her.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah. So there are people talking in the chat about
Yeah.
their favorite type of horror. Do you obviously Stephen King is your favorite type of
Well,
horror?
I think to me it's I think I'm not into you know well, I did do a werewolf show because I feel like I have a soft spot for werewolves, and I think werewolves are hard on screen, so I really wanted to do uh werewolves in audio. So I did a show, Blood Forest. And I do like the kind of type of Stephen King horror, which is like a whole community gets involved in the fight against the bad guy kind of stuff, and seeing the kind of unlikely bonds between people. I think that's just really fun versus necessarily the like, I don't know, the kind of final girl type of horror construction, or the sort of like lone hero sort of thing. It's fun to have like the unlikely motley group of people who become, trying to save our town from the big bad. So anyways, yeah, Joel, I mean, yes, Lock and Key, the audio drama is the like ElfQuest, and very much almost a comic panel by comic panel loyal adaptation. If I were to veer into that very quickly, because I do have a little bit of a mission statement on that. Okay, I guess it's not
Oh,
necessarily the case that this is the only way that audio could work, but I think there's sensitivity in the world of like development and studios and things about how like an audio drama could uh affect or cannibalize or take away from visual renditions of something. And sort of my philosophy on that is like, no. First off, like fans in general, like they just want more of the stuff they love, so just give them more of the stuff they love. And two, I do think yes, I mean, I love making original works for audio, of which I've made several, but it's also really fun to adapt things and keep them loyal to the source material. And so I think with ElfQuest, there was that question early on of like, do we what do we do with this? Do we do the exact story? Long story short, as you know, we made basically a very loyal True to the Comics in the order the comics began version of it. I do think Wendy and Richard were open to us having approached it differently, but it also was like, well, you knew what you were doing in terms of like
Mhm.
when you started this story, and yeah, and should we be so lucky that some animated or some other medium version of this story should come to exist, go out and adapt it. But like when we're doing audio in this version of audio, let's stay close to the source material because we can do so much without having to deviate from the source material. So that was definitely our approach with Lock and Key. That's was our approach on ElfQuest. I'm also working on Batman for DC right now. There's a Batman called DC High Volume Batman, which has got some classic Batman comics, Year One, The Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and more coming out in the fall,
I
which have
love
the
Batman.
same philosophy. I mean, it's very different guy, very different point of view, but it's the same sort of underlying philosophy of these are iconic stories. They're kind of iconic and beloved and have stood the test of time for a reason. So this is the version that's like, it's not a take, it's not a spin, it's just like a lovingly crafted version of this in the audio format. And I think just to weave it back to Stephen King, my friend. They're like, when you look at some of the fandom there, and like the hits or misses on this, books to TV or film translations, it does seem like, yeah, people almost say like the sense of authorial voice is as often as what sometimes on the movies that don't work. Often that's the part that doesn't work, is that somehow the tone or sensibility of the original work didn't make it into the adaptation. And you got to make changes to make something work on screen that was originally a book or a comic or or whatever. But when you sort of forget what really made that thing appeal to it, then you're sort of like into dangerous water, because you might make something that nobody likes. And so to me, that's what we're always doing when we're doing these adaptations, is we're just trying to be like, what is the soul of this piece, and how do we get that into the thing we're making, and not just try to have our own egos make something that we think is cool, but totally forget why people loved the thing we're basing it on.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that you totally nailed the soul of ElfQuest, and it sounds like you're doing it with Star Trek Con as well. And there's a lot of love for Lock and Key in the chat.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I mean,
who knew that ElfQuest people were also so spooky.
we are very eclectic people that are just wide tastes, I think. I mean, that's been my experience. That I mean, everybody that's into ElfQuest, they're into just like so many cool artsy things, and we're just very sophisticated
Yeah.
connoisseurs,
Yeah.
consumers of
Well, that makes
content.
sense because it's a very non one dimension, anything but a one dimensional world. It's a very colorful world, a very ambiguity and magic and wonder and good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, and Wendy loves horror, like the
Yeah.
old horror movies. She talks
Yeah.
about them all the time, like the
Yeah.
creature from the Black Lagoon, and she likes those kind of like monster character, or the characters that appear very scary that actually have the soul, sort of like
Yeah.
Frankenstein's monster, like they just want loved like everybody else. And
Yeah, well, and I hope I assume if you're an ElfQuest fan, you're following it, but don't sleep on the Mask of the Red Death project.
oh yeah, it is so good. I mean, the songs that the composer and Wendy worked out together. I
So
mean,
good.
I have a theater kid, so I've had to listen to quite a few. Like
Yeah.
everything's a musical now.
Yeah.
Like literally everything. I saw like Groundhog Day, the movie, is now a musical, which
I
makes
missed the memo on that one,
it
and
makes no sense to me,
maybe we
but
should.
it's fine. Hey, you know. But yeah, The Mask of the Red Death is really good. And I loved how like it first came out in like these episodic comics, like every
Yeah.
month or week or something. But I love the way that they like edited it, like kind of put it together to make it more like a musical in this like new format for the animantic. It's really cool. And
Yeah,
it's
that's the version I'm most familiar with, but yeah, no, I love it, and I love, like, taking something that's, like, well known and making it fresh and, you know, clothing it differently is really, really fun.
yeah, and it's amazing that she modernized the story like 20 years ago, and it is so spot on
Yeah.
for what is going on right now, like with just the little like entertainment like robot holograms that are reporting on stuff. And I mean, she's just like predicting social media before it was even really a thing. And like all of the, oh, he was wearing that this time, like all those like little things that she wove in there. It's brilliant. Like,
Yeah, no, she's so good. I mean, I feel like, uh, you know, she's just like such a attuned human. I think that like I think sometimes, you know, people look at like, you know, writers and storytellers that are like, oh, they're like so like prophetic, and it's like, well, maybe, but I think like it may just be that they're very compassionate or they have a lot of empathy or they just have a lot of keen powers of observation of the human spirit, which is different than being a prophet because there's not necessarily a supernatural quality to it. It's just a deeply connected to their humanity quality to it, which is like I think I find that interpretation of it valuable because it means that like you too can have that power because it's not just like, oh, and certain people are bequeathed with this like magical ability to predict all this technology. It's like, no, I think, you know, yeah, some people have different life experiences that sort of opens up their awareness to certain things, but it means that like also pretty much everybody has that ability to like take a more observant lens as to what's happening and say, wow, huh, if we were to follow this trend to the nth degree, what would become of us? And would that be good? Or how would we feel about that? And how do I want to explore that? Do I explore that through humor? Do I want to explore that by making it scary? Do I want to explore that through satire? You know, anyways, that's fun.
oh, I love that. I love that interpretation. That is true. I think people should be more observant. I think
Yeah.
that everyone does have that potential to create and see how things are going to flow and why
Yeah.
people come together. So this has been such a pleasure. It has
Yeah.
been great having you on and talking about all of your body of work and ElfQuest and Star Trek. So I hope everybody will listen to Star Trek Con, which is out now. There are new episodes every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts. And also the ElfQuest audio movie, if you haven't listened to it yet, it is also wherever you get your
And you can
podcasts.
go binge the whole thing right
You
now.
can binge the entire thing, which it's so great. Make sure you're wearing like really good headphones
Yeah.
because there are so many just great like just it's a totally immersive experience. And it was just like a love letter to all of the fans. And it's great for people who aren't fans too, because it is a complete um story and it's cinematic, and I just love it. So thank you so much for coming on, Fred. It has been just so great talking to you.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, it's been an hour already. Wow, this is so much fun. Thank you, Tanya. What a blast. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Right. And thank you, everybody, for being part of this amazing community. And if you're new here, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the fun. And don't forget to like this video and hit the notification bell so that you can stay up to date with everything that we are doing. And if you would like to get your brand in front of this eclectic, wonderful tribe, consider being a sponsor. Our fans are passionate about ElfQuest, sci-fi, Steam, and innovation, and they are ready to connect with brands that share their values. So whether you're a small business or an individual, Click the link in the show description box to be a sponsor, or head over to sci-fi sisters.com/sponsors to learn more about how we can work together. Okay, so I will be back on October 8th. I have another fun show with a very exciting guest who is just also multi-talented, but you'll find out more later. And also come back next Wednesday for Soul of the Story with Derek Tyler Attico. And we will see you then. So thank you for everybody. Bye. Shade and Sweetwater.
Yeah, she's worth.